Okay, so have you ever been in a tabletop RPG and like your spellcaster just feels kind of ordinary? You know, like you have all this arcane power, but you end up reaching for the same spells over and over again while all these other spells on your character sheet are gathering dust.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's super easy to get stuck in a routine, using spells that have worked well before, or ones where it's like immediately obvious what they do. But that can mean missing out on some really interesting and powerful magic.
It's like this one time, our group was in this forgotten temple, and we like accidentally woke up this ancient guardian, this huge stone golem, powered by who knows what kind of magic. And it was just relentless. It ignored most of our attacks, and its own hits were just devastating. We were doing everything we could, hitting it with our strongest spells, trying to control its movements, all that. But nothing really worked. We were stuck in this loop of like, try the same tactics, watch them fail, hope fading fast. Then our gnome illusionist, who usually liked to do these flashy spells, all of a sudden got this look on his face like he had an idea, and he muttered something about a spell I honestly forgot he even had it prepared. What happened next was so unexpected. He cast the spell, I won't say what it is just yet, and suddenly the golem, this towering, unthinking thing, started to hesitate. It turned its giant head like it heard something far away, its attacks became clumsy and unfocused, and in that moment of confusion, we saw our chance and finally took it down. It was this amazing aha moment. This spell, something we'd basically ignored, had the key to beating this thing that seemed impossible.
That's such a great example of how a less obvious spell can completely change the game. It really shows the depth that game designers put into these systems, giving players lots of different ways to solve problems if they're willing to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And that's what we're diving into today. We're talking about the surprising power of underused spells in Dungeons & Dragons, and we're using this awesome article from LitRPG Reads as our guide. It's called The Top 5 Most Underused D&D Spells That Can Completely Change Your Game.
So, in this deep dive, what we want to do for you listening is shine a light on these overlooked spells, explore how they can create really memorable moments in your games and even change how the game is played. By the end, we hope you'll have some really cool ideas to take back to your own D&D games, adding a new level of creative problem solving to your magic.
So when we talk about underused spells, one of the first questions is, well, why are they underused? Often, it's because their effects aren't immediately clear. Like, we see a damage spell and we get it. But a spell that messes with perception or the environment needs a little more imagination to understand its potential. Take Minor Illusion, the first spell from the article. It might seem basic, you make a quick image or sound, but the article calls it the ultimate deception tool.
Right. Like, at first glance, being able to create a picture of something or a sound in a 5-foot cube for a minute doesn't sound super exciting. But when you start to think about the possibilities in a real game situation, like creating the illusion of a wall in the middle of a fight, that could make ranged attackers change their positions, waste their turns attacking something that's not there, or even give your allies cover while they move. It's about messing with the enemy's senses and making them unsure.
And it's not just about visual cover. Imagine you make the sound of reinforcements coming from a different direction. That could really confuse your opponents, maybe even scare them into breaking formation or running away. Or think about making fake threats, fighting some bandits. Suddenly, an illusion of a huge monster appears behind your party, and maybe those bandits will think twice about attacking.
I also thought it was cool how you could use minor illusion for secret communication. Making a secret visual signal or a quiet message between party members when it's crowded or dangerous could be really helpful for making plans without anyone else knowing. And the article mentioned making phantom obstacles. Picture a narrow passageway. An illusion of a pile of rocks could block the enemy, giving you time to escape or set a trap.
And what's really clever is using illusions of items as distractions. A flash of fake gold in an alley might lure guards away from their posts, creating a chance to sneak in. Or you could copy an ally's voice to trick an NPC or deliver a message from someone they wouldn't expect. And mimicking monster sounds, that has so many possibilities. You could scare off animals, maybe even intimidate weaker enemies.
Yeah, or even hiding warning signals. Imagine if enemies use specific sounds or visuals to communicate. A well-placed minor illusion could cover those up, messing up their plans. And I love the point about using it for storytelling in the environment. A flickering light in a supposedly empty room could hint that someone's there, or a quiet whisper could make a spooky place even creepier.
And creating fake exits during a chase. That could be the difference between getting caught and getting away. Imagine a maze of hallways, and you make an illusion of a door that's not really there, leading the people chasing you down a dead end. Or you could create fake soundscapes. like the illusion of a busy market to hide your movements in a quiet town. In the end, like the article says, how well minor illusion works depends on how strategically the player thinks and how they weave it into the story of the game. It's about outsmarting your opponents, not just overpowering them.
That was a great breakdown. Now let's move on to a spell that's often seen as just useful, Mold Earth. When I first saw the spell, I thought, okay, this is for digging holes, right?
That's a very common first reaction, and it
Yeah.
shows how a spell's less obvious uses can make it overlooked. But Mold Earth's power to manipulate loose earth and stone has a lot of tactical possibilities, way beyond just digging.
So besides digging, what kind of advantages can you get from reshaping the terrain? The article talks about creating cover during ranged attacks. How would you use that effectively in the middle of a fight?
In a single action, you can move or dig up to 5 cubic feet of loose earth or stone. Imagine instantly making a small wall of dirt to protect yourself or a friend from arrows or spells. It's a quick way to make temporary cover where there was none before.
That's way more dynamic than I originally thought. And the article also mentions hiding dangerous things. Could you explain how mold earth could be used for that?
Sure, think about burying a trap more effectively, or putting a layer of loose dirt over a tripwire to make it harder to see. You could also use it to find hidden things or weaknesses in structures by carefully moving earth to reveal what's underneath.
And on a bigger scale, making trenches for defense sounds like a big advantage. If you're being attacked in an open area, quickly digging even shallow trenches could give you some protection and force the enemy to move in ways that are easier to handle.
Exactly. It can really change the shape of the battlefield. And think about using it for travel clearing paths through thick bushes or areas with lots of rubble. Could make your group move much faster. The article also talked about fortifying bases by making installations higher. Imagine quickly building up a small wall of earth around your camp to have a better view or extra defense.
Oh, using mold earth to set up ambushes with hidden pitfalls sounds pretty sneaky. Just slightly weakening the ground or creating a shallow hidden pit could lead to some surprising and advantageous moments.
And don't forget about using it for storytelling. The article mentions using mold earth to create environmental art. A character with some creativity could shape the earth to enhance a performance, mark a trail, or even create a temporary memorial. It adds a unique element to interacting with the environment. And you could even reshape the battlefield to confuse opponents. Making small hills and dips could make it harder for them to see and attack properly. Mold Earth offers a lot of tactical flexibility, much more than just digging.
Okay, moving on. Our third underused spell is silence. Now, the article says that you need to think strategically about when and where to use it. Why does it depend so much on the specific situation?
Silence creates a 20-foot radius sphere of complete silence around a spot you choose within range. What's important is that no sound can go in or out of that sphere, and that includes the words you need to say for many spells. So it can be really powerful, but how well it works depends on where you put it and how it will affect both you and your enemies.
It seems like the most obvious use is to stop enemy spellcasters who need to speak to cast their spells. Making what the article calls an anti-magic zone could completely shut down a strong mage at a crucial moment.
Definitely. In a fight against a wizard throwing spells everywhere, a well-timed silence spell in the right place can make a lot of their magic useless, potentially changing the whole fight.
But it's not just about stopping magic, is it? The article also says it can really help with stealth. Suddenly, a character in heavy armor isn't making noise with every step, and whispers can't be heard.
Exactly. It makes it much harder to be detected. It can also disrupt enemies from talking to each other, stopping them from coordinating attacks, calling for help, or even setting off alarms that need sound. Think about sneaking into a guarded place. A silence spell could be super helpful for moving around without being noticed.
I hadn't even thought about how useful it would be to hide your own team's communication during a raid or an ambush. Being able to coordinate quietly gives you a big advantage.
And it's great for avoiding attention when you're repositioning during a fight. If your group needs to retreat or flank the enemy, a silence spell could mask your movements. It also protects your own spellcasters because enemies can't use spells or abilities that interrupt spellcasting that needs words.
And it can stop sound trust traps. That could save your life in a dungeon. Plus, it makes quiet escapes much easier when you need to be sneaky.
And it's great for discreet scouting. Imagine being able to scout ahead, totally silent, gathering information without anyone knowing you're there. Silence is really powerful when information and stealth are crucial for success. Like the article says, its usefulness comes from careful planning and knowing when cutting off sound will give you the upper hand.
Our fourth underused spell is heat metal. The article says this one is often ignored but works really well against enemies wearing armor. Why do players tend to dismiss it?
Maybe it's because it's so specific. It only works on metal objects. Against creatures without metal armor or weapons, it might seem useless. But against the right targets, heat metal consistently deals a lot of damage and can even bypass some resistances.
So it damages a metal object someone is wearing or holding over time, and the article specifically says it ignores some resistances. That's a big deal against heavily armored enemies who might just shrug off other types of attacks.
Exactly. Many creatures that are resistant to fire or other common types of damage might still feel the full effects of the intense heat coming from their own armor or weapons. And the damage each round adds up quickly, making enemies make tough choices.
The examples in the article really show its potential. Making enemies drop their weapons from a distance because they're too hot immediately weakens them.
Or imagine creating hazards in a dungeon using heated chains or metal grates. Suddenly, something that seemed harmless becomes a source of burning pain, and being able to disable important NPCs who are wearing metal armor can quickly change a fight in your favor.
I also like the idea of just distracting strong enemies. Even if they don't take off their armor, the constant pain could really mess with their focus and make them fight worse. Turning their own protection into a weakness is a really clever tactic. And restricting movement through unbearable heat. Imagine a knight in heavy armor struggling to move because their armor is basically cooking them from the inside.
It can definitely create chaos as armored enemies try to get their armor off or just give up because it hurts too much. And in some cases, the pain might even make enemies surrender rather than keep fighting. The constant damage makes it a threat they can't ignore. As the article says, heat metal makes heavily armored enemies really uncomfortable, making it a surprisingly powerful spell in the right situation.
And finally, we have our fifth underused spell, Pass Without Trace. The article calls this one essential for stealth, even though its effects seem subtle. Why is it so important for a party trying to be sneaky?
Pass Without Trace gives you and anyone you choose within 30 feet a +10 bonus to dexterity stealth checks, and it also stops creatures from tracking you using non-magical means. That +10 bonus is huge in D&D, making even characters in heavy armor surprisingly good at moving silently.
A +10 bonus is massive. The article says this can change a lot of things in the game, from moving through dangerous places to sneaking into enemy bases and even getting a better position in a fight. Let's look at some of those possibilities. Setting up an ambush becomes much more reliable when the whole party can approach without being seen.
Absolutely. That element of surprise can often be the deciding factor in a tough fight. And setting up hidden defenses, getting into a strong defensive position without the enemy even knowing you're there, can be super powerful.
And just being able to make the whole team move quietly. No more worrying about that one noisy person alerting every creature for miles. Plus, planning a silent escape becomes way less risky.
It's also great for quick tactical maneuvers against patrols. If you run into enemies unexpectedly, Pass Without Trace gives you a much better chance of getting away without being noticed or setting up a surprise attack. And it's perfect for secret transportation. Whether you're smuggling something or moving a VIP quietly, this spell is a must-have.
The article also mentioned using it for espionage, making sure you're not discovered. It's perfect for gathering information without leaving any trace. And laying traps becomes much easier when you can move silently and precisely.
Exploring unmapped or dangerous areas without being detected keeps your group much safer and lets you explore more thoroughly. And using guerrilla tactics in sieges or hostile territories becomes a lot more viable when you can move unseen. Protecting vulnerable people or injured allies by hiding them in safe, hidden spots is another crucial use. And for any mission that needs secrecy, Pass Without Trace is a game changer. Like the article says, it really shows the power of moving without leaving a trace to achieve your goals.
So there you have it. Miter Illusion, Mold Earth, Silence, Heat Metal, and Pass Without Trace. 5 spells that might not be the flashiest or the most obvious choices, but when used creatively and strategically, they can unlock some surprising and powerful possibilities in your D&D games. It really highlights the fact that even the smallest details in this game can have huge potential.
What's really insightful about these spells is that they encourage a different way of thinking about problems. They go beyond just dealing damage and encourage players to think about manipulating information, the environment, and even the enemy's perceptions to achieve their goals.
Thinking about these spells, how could changing the spells you usually use help your party overcome a challenge they're facing now? Or maybe even open up a new and unexpected path in your current adventure?
That's a really important question for anyone playing a spellcasting character. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most powerful spell you have, but the one that interacts with this situation in a clever and imaginative way.
A big thanks to LitRPG Reads and Paul Bello for bringing these awesome, underused spells to our attention. We'll put a link to the full article in the notes for this deep dive.
It's definitely worth reading for any D&D player who wants to add some new strategies to their spellcasting.
Now, we'd love to hear from you. What are some of the underused spells you found surprisingly effective in your games? Have you ever had an aha moment using a spell you initially overlooked? Tell us about your experiences in the comments below. We always enjoy hearing your stories.